apologize. It's 4 o'clock. We have a quorum present, so today's meeting of the Board of Health is now officially open. You can, Curtis.
I'm sitting down. You
Okay.
won't let me.
All right.
You're telling me all about what's going to happen.
I have no idea what's going to happen. Then we can cancel the meeting, and you can tell us what happened. All right. Just to inform you all, remind you all that the meeting is recorded. Are there any comments from the public on any item that is not on today's agenda? Hearing none, we'll move on to the minutes from the last meeting. Any comments, corrections, additions?
Nope.
Hearing none, the minutes of the January 19th meeting are approved by unanimous consent. We have a variance request for 31 Brewster. You want to explain that?
The 31 Brewster variance is a request for to connect a conventional septic system as part of a repair. It is hydraulically failed right now, and they would like to put in a conventional system while they wait for the sewer to come across. We've done this many times before. I don't see.
We did it.
We've done it with
last
Pippins. We did it last week. Yes.
All right. Any questions from the board about this?
No.
Do it.
Motion to approve.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor of approving the variance for 31 Brewster, say aye.
Aye.
Chairman says aye. Variance is approved. Now we next have two public hearings. The way we'll work this is I'll open the hearing, and then Roberto will summarize the issue for us, and then we'll open it to general comments, and we'll move from there. So, hearing for regulation 78 is now open. Roberto, introduction.
So the regulation 78 is known as the regulation to connect to town water. This regulation is before you as a recommendation from myself and the staff regarding a potential and already current contamination in drinking and potable water wells throughout the island. What we're looking to do here is require people to connect to town water if it is available and abutting their property. We have received an endorsement from the Water Commission, the commissioners, and we are looking to just prevent health issues. What really became an issue here for me was I started collating some of the data that we have, some certificates of analysis from some water wells that I do have. There is a spreadsheet that I do have to present. It is before you as well, where I have collated the data that we have. In that data, we have found that in many cases, in some watersheds, in Nantucket, for example, 90% of all the wells in Nantucket has had at least one exceedance from their certificate of analysis that we have. In Nantucket Harbor watershed, of the data I've pulled so far, 58% has had at least one exceedance. In the Hummock Pond watershed, 77% have had at least one exceedance. And in the other parts of the island that we're still trying to collate because it is significant size, 75% of all the wells that we've pulled has had at least one exceedance of the Massachusetts Safe Drinking Water Act. So before you have this regulation that we have presented. I have also provided a memo to the town, to the board, that I hope you may have had time to read, which I also have here presented, if the public would like to read it as well. And that would be it for now.
Okay. Any comments from the public? Please, Charlie, go up, introduce yourself.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. My name is Charles Stott. I'm the president of the Nantucket Residents Association. Last week, I polled our board of directors and heard from 8 of 9 members who agreed without dissent that the MRA, which is the voice of its 160 members, should oppose proposed Regulation 78 as well as the amendment to Regulation 51. First, the timing for considering these two changes should be in the summer months, when seasonal owners have the opportunity to learn about and ask questions about these far-reaching changes. Last July, for example, town officials held a public hearing on the proposed sewer expansion, so owners could become informed and the town could capture input from seasonal residents. Costly requirements such as these should not be hastily considered. With respect to Regulation 78, the stated purpose is to further protect Nantucket residents from ingesting contaminants found in well water. Where are the data that indicates that Nantucket has a widespread problem of well water contamination? Before requiring an expensive solution, let's establish that there's a problem. Is it possible that the Health Department is using data from the Comprehensive Wastewater Management Plan, which measured contamination in Nantucket's harbors, creeks, and ponds, and to infer from that that the drinking water is polluted? If this is meant to address a public health issue, why not target it to owners whose wells have been compromised? I just had my well water tested, and it's perfectly fine. So if I have a perfectly functioning well providing water free from contaminants, why should I abandon it and be required to connect to town water? A more appropriate regulation would be one that requires owners of wells to have their water tested periodically, perhaps every 2 years, with results being provided to the health department. Those well owners with contaminated water would then be required to take corrective action, which could be to dig a new well, connect to town water, or to take some other action. Results of such testing could be analyzed to discern patterns of contamination, if any. Then remedies could be targeted to individuals or groups of homeowners. And that data could also be used by Nantucket Water Company for strategic expansion planning. I was talking to someone a little earlier today, and they suggested that if you're going to require that people connect to water, that we should require that water be available to all homeowners on Nantucket. Otherwise, it's sort of similar to spot zoning. I would urge you to oppose Regulation 78. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you. Other comments? Yes, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Larry Levine, and I live at 6 Crestwood Circle in Tom Nevers, but I'm also speaking today as the owner of Tristram's Management Company. We manage 29 interval ownership houses out in Nantucket, in addition to managing 30 other private homes in Nantucket. In 2010 and 2011, as a result of Board of Health requirements, we had 18 septic systems installed. This was required under the previous Board of Health rules and regulations. 15 of these systems were IA systems, and 3 were simple conventional septic systems. At that time, IA systems were required for houses.
I'd really like to just talk about 78.
Okay, I'll get to
for the next one.
Yep, I'll get to that. I just wanted to just give you a background on what on what we did, and the reason for the septic replacements was a mix of hydraulic failures and a lack of 6-foot protective zone. So on the issue to commenting on town water, I want to agree with Charlie that there doesn't seem to be any reason why we couldn't have requirements to sample water every 2 years or so. In fact, my understanding is that I have to that for the the septic systems that I have, I have to have O&M agreements in place, and we test the water coming out of the septic system every year. There's no reason, actually twice a year. There's no reason why we couldn't do the same with the well water. It didn't appear to me that there's a provision for keeping our well if we wanted to use it for other non-potable uses like irrigation system, outside showers, etc. And in areas designated sensitive by the Board of Health, I'm just wondering if there's enough resources available on island to meet the 6-month install schedule. I would assume that there needs to be a bunch of resources on island to be able to meet that 6-month schedule if we're in a designated sensitive area. So I wish you'd take that into account as well.
Thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Dick Barraby. I'm with Fisher's Landing, which, of course, is on the way to Nantucket. With regard to 78, I just question the fairness and the efficacy of what you're trying to propose. I can understand the logic of it, but for example, there are a number of people in Fisher's Landing who have perfectly fine wells, always included, get tested routinely, whose neighbors have failed hydraulically and technically their septic systems. And they're the people that, in our opinion, should bear the burden or the onus of correcting their neighbor's situation with regard to what you're trying to propose. I just question that the end result will do what it is you're trying to accomplish. It almost appears to me, with due respect, this looks a lot like a solution in search of a problem. And I have great respect for what it is you're trying to do. I just think that ought to be seriously rethought, because it would represent a financial burden for people who were obliged to use wells to begin with at Fisher's Landing, pending the completion of the tank on Cliff Road and the infrastructure to transport that water out to Fisher's Landing. In other words, in the beginnings of Fisher's Landing, from roughly 1979 up until around the middle 90s, no one had town water out there. I may be off a little bit on that final date. So we were obliged to do that. Even people who worked for the water company suggested to me on numerous occasions, if your well is fine, Dick, leave it alone. It'll only cost you more to hook up to town water and pay for the monthly bill, and you'll gain nothing from it. We have 2 dwellings, one of which is on town water because it was far less expensive, and it was much more efficacious to do so at that time in 2000. When the original property was put together back in 1985, there's no such thing as town water anywhere out there, so we didn't have a choice but to put in the well. So I've spoken long enough about that. Respect what you're doing. Just consider, I support Charlie 1,000%. He was a heck of a more eloquent than I on how to really better look at the situation. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Dennis Laidis, and I haven't read the regs. I have a question about if you're in the aquifer protection area, would you get a waiver on it? Considering it would be the same kind of water.
We have an option to give waivers, variances for any regulation, given the circumstance.
So people that are in the aquifer protection area wouldn't have to hook up to town water.
I don't know that.
I mean, it would make sense that you wouldn't have to,
I know.
right?
I haven't thought about that, so I don't.
That's something to consider.
Yes.
Thanks.
Anyone else? Okay, then we will close the public hearing and we will discuss this. Just this one paragraph in 7805B where it says no variance shall be granted, speaking of variances.
Yes.
That's
We can take that.
Yeah.
Definitely take it out. Terry, can you scroll down a little bit to 7805?
Only when I'm there, I don't have my glasses.
Stop.
It just says right here.
Yeah, no variance, 7805B. Yeah, it's definitely something that's unenforceable. We can definitely take out 7805B.
Yeah, I mean, that's just, of course, there's a variance, always a variance.
Yeah, it's the wording that's been there since
All
the
right.
original one.
Comments from the board?
Well, here's my take on the thing. I don't know for what it's worth. I think if someone has a well
Jimmy,
anywhere, not just Nantucket, anywhere,
Jimmy,
if
the
the
microphone.
water tests, I'm sorry, if the water tests fine, they should be able to keep their well. If the water test doesn't, they should have an option, if they so wish, to put a filtering system on that well to bring it up to any standards the Board of Health or the Health Department says they should have. If they can't make their water good, then I suggest that they tie into town water.
The testing provision was definitely something that I have no problem with. It was brought up by numerous amounts of comments via email that are in your packet, as well as you've heard today. The testing provision is actually an excellent way to do it. It actually relieves the burden from us on the variance side so that we don't get a flood of variances. So if we were to make the provision where, just like was suggested today, testing once every 2 years, and if the water doesn't meet the drinking standard, then we have to start remedial actions. I believe that is a very logical step.
The other question I have is, what about the people that are on the other side of Millie's Bridge? You can't tell someone on this side of Millie's Bridge he's got to tie into town water, and tell the people on the other side of Millie Bridge, you're all right, just put a filter on your well. You've got to address that.
It's the same addressing that you're talking about having to put in filtration systems, having to put in that sort of thing. However, it's more expensive to put in some filtration systems than it is to connect to town water.
Then why not?
Houses are already over there, but they're already hung wells over there. They're all right.
They're
But
all
they
right?
don't have access to the town water.
Yeah, I mean,
No,
this
I know
requirement is just, I mean, I don't know.
I
that we-
understand that, but what I'm saying is, some people, if they have a bad well, they don't even have access to town water.
Mhm.
So what do they do?
On their own, they've corrected their problem on their own. If anybody has one on that side of the bridge, if it's too bad to drink or it's high in iron or something, they'll usually just do bottled water and you use it for regular showering and everything else.
So
Would-
people on this side of the bridge should have the same option. That's all I'm saying.
The requirement to connect to a town water has actually been deemed as a major public health prevention project and deemed part of the Public Health Prevention Act from the feds, and it is deemed part of our police duties to do so. Drinking water, protection of drinking water as well as protection of sewers is the primary preventative effort of any public health program. When you have access to pure, clean water that we have to maintain by the state of Massachusetts, we are allowed to require that connection by our own federal statute, as well as our state mandate from DEP.
What I just maybe a little bit of side issue. There's a lot of wells here that have failed.
Could we talk a little bit about what this actually is and what it tells
Yeah,
us?
that's- I wanna-
how many and so
Because
forth?
let's go back to, there's
Okay.
been a lot of questions about a solution looking for a problem. But here's the
Yes.
problem, so let's talk about the problem, then we can go for a solution.
Terry, can you open up the Excel spreadsheet? I can move over there and do it.
And while we're doing that, just to go back to, if I might, Mr. Chairman, back
Please.
to Jim's point, I assume the logic of what you're talking about over the bridge would be, it sounds like it ought to be the same for anybody who doesn't have town water running in front of their property, Jim, right? I mean, I'm not,
Right.
okay, I just want to make sure we're not singling that out as the only
Right.
area.
Right.
Okay.
If people on the other side of the bridge have the option to do filtering systems, people on this side of the bridge should have that same option.
Yeah, just want to be clear.
So I'm going to move over to that computer
Yeah, and just because, and some of these dates go pretty far back. So that, I mean, there is a problem.
But some of these wells, I noticed there's only 2 wells on the first page that were actually checked in 2016. Some of these checks go back to 1999. Have they been checked since 1999?
Apparently.
Not to. There is no mandate right now that requires people when they test their water to have the water be sent to us, that certificate of analysis sent to us. So in many cases, yes, it may have been checked since 1999, but if so, we don't have that data.
So
The data that I have up here is the most up-to-date data that I have on each one of those wells.
My question to you is, if it was checked in 1999 and it was bad, does that mean it would be bad 18 years later?
Depends on what nutrient the failure is from. If it's from sodium, we can easily assume that yes, there have been more saltwater intrusion since then.
Okay, just want to summarize the data again, and then we'll...
Yes, sir. So this data that I have here, everything that you see in pink on this spreadsheet, this one's Nantucket, but everything you see in pink on any one of these columns is an exceedance of the Massachusetts Safe Water Drinking Act. There is when it says deviation from an MCL, the MCL is a maximum contaminant level, so set by the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection. And the deviance is a negative number is bad, positive is good. If it's positive, that's how far below the standard you are. If it's negative, it's how far above the standard you are. So I have a column in here that tells you if one or more exceedance is present in the well, you have it marked as pink with a number 1 on it. Every single thing in pink is an exceedance. Most of the exceedances are on pH, where you'll see pretty acidic levels of water. To put it in perspective, orange juice has a pH of 4.1. Some sodas that everyone knows is corrosive, Coca-Cola, Diet Coke, root beers, things like that, some sodas have pHs of 5.2. And we still see pHs below that. Anything below a 6.5 is considered an acidic or a corrosive pH by the Massachusetts Safe Water Drinking Act. The reason corrosivity is important is because some of the houses that are built around this island are of a historical, most of the houses are of a historical nature. Some may still have lead pipes present. Not since the lead pipes have been removed, but new construction, but some might still have some lead pipes present. All the other ones that have the older iron pipes, things like that, you may see corrosivity in their pipes as well. And those ions enter the drinking water at the level of the house. So over time, you will see these ions growing in the drinking water. All of these contaminants bioaccumulate, which means your body does not get rid of it once you start ingesting them. So things like copper are linked to liver failure. High levels of iron, other than just the staining and stuff, it's mostly an aesthetic issue. High levels of nitrate, moderate levels of nitrate, you'll see in the memo that I sent out, which is also available online under the Health Department website. In the memo that I sent, I linked to a comprehensive study as well as a meta-analysis that says that nitrate levels of approximately 5 milligrams per liter, which is half of the state maximum contaminant level, have been linked to a 2-fold increase in spina bifida in infants, have been increased to an 80% increase in cleft palates, and have been increased to about a 70% increase to limb deficiencies in infants. So in theory, pregnant women should not be drinking well water that has nitrates of anything above 4 milligrams per liter. So I've collected data. This is the most data we have is from the Nantucket area, which is where the highest concentrations of wells that we have. I have also data on the Nantucket Harbor watershed, and I also have minimal data on Hummock Pond and the areas outside of these other watersheds, like the well protection district that was mentioned earlier. In these levels, the well protection district has 75% of their wells already with at least one exceedance. Almost all of them have been through pH. Hummock Pond, 77th with one exceedance, 55% of which are due to corrosivity. In Nantucket Harbor watershed, 58% has at least one exceedance, 35% is due to corrosivity. And in Nantucket, 90% has at least one exceedance. 63% is from sodium. 72% is from corrosivity. With the sodium, regardless of what opinion may be, we know for a fact sea level is rising. Saltwater intrusion is happening. We're seeing it on some of the wells going further out west, the more you see it. There is a particular well on number 28 and 29, two particular wells that, as you see, have 250 milligrams per liter of sodium. For references, the maximum contaminant level set by the state of Massachusetts is 20. This is 11 times the state level.
It's just let me point out something. This is just a small group of houses where the wells that you tested are, the average is over 12 years old. Do you know how many wells that are in the ground in Nantucket?
This is the data we have in our files.
It's skewed.
So
if sodium was taken off the Environmental Protection Agency's CCL contaminant list. So
federally, but it is still part of the state, which we are part of the state.
Sodium, you get more sodium in your food than you do in your water, in this little bit of water thing. So, it's not. I'm just telling you out there.
How often what are the requirements of testing?
If it was a public drinking water, the guidelines say at least once a year. Mm-hmm. For private wells, it's recommended by the Geological Survey to be tested at least once a year, but we don't have a mandate to require testing.
The state doesn't, nor does the EPA.
Yeah.
Private wells are unregulated except for going to get a well permit from the Board of Health to drill a well.
Mm-hmm. And the well completion report does not go to us, it goes to the state.
So there is a problem. The question is, how bad is the problem? How good is the data?
The issue...
And we do have a responsibility.
Yes. And
we know we have a problem, so we have to.
And the issue
of
sampling bias, well, yes, these wells samples are old, and it might be a sampling bias based on what we have available. But once again, it is just from what we have available. I'd be happy to do a more longevity study. I'd be happy to do a larger cross-sectional study, but this is what I have.
Malcolm, Mr. Chairman. From the few comments, I was frankly a little surprised at the paucity of comments. I thought amongst this group we'd have more, but we'll take those as representative. And this sort of gets at what Roberto's talking about, and you are. In other words, if we had a required testing program over the course of 3 years, you'd be reasonably up to date, Steve, and your sample would be, in theory, 100%. And then we could analyze the data with current data and see where we go. So that's one advantage of a testing program as a way to get started here. And once if we went in that direction, we might find there are other objections we haven't heard about today. But at the moment, I haven't heard about those. It would be interesting also to compare this kind of grid. In other words, if that's the standard protocol that testing is going to come back with.
Mhm.
I mean, if we do this, we have to get some standards, Malcolm, to know what we're testing for, who provides the test. Is it the same test that people bring their water to the Board of Health now? And is that the one we're going to use or not? It would be interesting to compare that to the water company's tests, just as a sort of a proxy. How do they, presumably they're at perfect levels all the way across, but who knows? That would help understand the differences among the water available to people also. So just some thoughts.
Yeah, I actually closed the public hearing, but go ahead.
Hi, my name's Norm Reith. I live in Nantucket. I'm listening to everything here, and it appears as though we're talking about outdated or not all of it up to date. Like Rick had just said, you need to have a program together where you actually monitor
Which I
the
would
water.
support, but as of
I think
right now, we
should.
don't have it.
But you're talking about mandating
So,
everybody to hook up to town water before you've done your homework. Let's do the homework and then talk about
is-
where you want to go from there.
Regardless of whatever we do, whatever program we decide, it still has to be done as a regulation. It still has to be done in a public hearing, which means we would still be right here where we are right now, having the same discussion that we're having. I am fully supportive of doing a testing program,
Right.
which we can put into this regulation.
I think we should. Right.
What would it test? How would it happen?
So we do water testing every Tuesday. It is $45 to the Barnstable County Laboratory, $5 to cover shipping for the health department. You can get the water testing kit from any of the local pharmacies. You just ask for the water testing bottle, and I think it's $2. You bring it to us, we get it out. All we would need is for you to give us a copy when you receive the data for your certificate of analysis, that we get a copy of that. I would suggest that we do a sampling once every 2 years
Of each well.
of each well, of each potable drinking water well. And to also address the comments about non-potable drinking water well, the reason the regulation stays silent on non-potable drinking water well is because you can still use your well under this regulation. You can wash cars with it, you can irrigate your lawn with it. We're not trying to force people to abandon the well.
Just going back to the program of getting more recent information or a standard,
Mm-hmm.
we would require everyone on the island to test their water every 2 years.
We can definitely stagger it.
We could do that.
We can definitely stagger it. So one of the things we'll want to do is, if you're on an odd year, Nantucket and Hummock Pond. If you're on an even year, Nantucket Harbor Watershed, Wellhead, and elsewhere. Sconset, things like that.
I have a question. Could Mr. Gardner speak to this? Is there any way the water company can help us with the testing of this, people's wells? Do you people test water?
Not,
No?
Yeah, I don't think they have their own
Get
laboratory.
sent off.
Yeah, no, it always gets sent
Mr.
off.
Ray.
Okay.
Richard Ray, private citizen. I understand that the hearing is closed, but thank you for the executive privilege. Perhaps, as the regulation is written, you must connect to municipal water if it abuts your property. Am I correct?
Yes.
I guess I'd like to hear from the Wannacomet Water Company to know where the water lines are now. I don't believe they're in a great deal of Nantucket. And is there a movement underfoot to expand that to include some of the side streets and the smaller roadways?
Maybe the water company wants to answer. I mean, I think we have our own impression. I tell you, as an interested citizen, my impression is that on public roads in Nantucket, there's pipe down the roads. Private roads, where easements would have to be garnered, many of them have not come up with the easements, and the pipe does not run down those roads. So that's a general, but Bob can be much more specific.
That's correct, Rick. Your general, the water that's in Nantucket now, which has been done in 3 phases, serves approximately 280. There are 228 connections left
Connections?
for existing houses and lots, of which about 47 have connected in the system. There is an appropriation granted at the last town meeting for a final phase of extension to loop the system out there through the end of South Cambridge out Midland, Columbus, to get back to the line on Starbuck to improve water quality. But there are, as Rick said, there are numerous easement issues to be resolved on that. So,
Do you have any plans to continue to go forward getting easements, to extend the lines anyway?
we won't get the easements. The homeowners will get the easements. This is the last, it may change in a couple of years, but this would complete the loop through the system so we can maintain redundancy and better fire flow. But after this expansion, if it happens, I don't believe we have any more plans to extend the system in Nantucket.
So in Nantucket itself, how many people right now would be eligible to tie into town water?
Exact number is hard to say because zoning changes, but when the line is extended, every dwelling gets a connection.
Right.
It's left at the property line. And as I say, there are 228 of those from the second bridge on, of which roughly 40%, 87 or so, have connected into the system. So it goes by your house, you get a connection to the system. You pay when you decide to connect. You pay the fee, and you're in.
I'd just like to say that I mean, Nantucket, most of the people here from Nantucket has been singled out, and you can draw your own conclusion from that. But you're just the tip of the iceberg. This is going to affect more people that are across the island than it is just Nantucket.
Well,
there's more wells around the island besides just Nantucket. There's more than out there.
And a lot of this,
with access to town water,
right, most
that
of
are
the data
still on
is
their wells.
from Nantucket, but it's from the whole island. I'm kind of coming to a resolution myself, but go ahead.
Could just, I think it's just, again, a general comment. My recollection going back, 10 or 15 years, is that there was a cry from many Nantucket residents who wanted water delivered to Nantucket. So it's not as if the water company woke up one day and said, we're going to force water down your throat. That's not what happened. It was in response to demand for people who were interested and were concerned primarily about drinking water and fire protection. And we can draw an analogy to the Hummock Pond area, where some of the same issues, perhaps their intrusion into their wells was more severe. But Bob might comment on what happened when the water, in terms of easements, just to compare one section of Nantucket to another. My understanding is that they came up with easements very quickly. They may have had a different level of need or desire, but these things are different by neighborhood, just to share with everybody. So
It would seem to me a logical way to handle this, I'm open for debate, is that we did do mandate water testing, and you could do it staggered. And if you failed, then you had to hook up.
Which I can easily do.
That would be more logical to me, because obviously there are wells that are unacceptable.
If we continue the hearing to another meeting, I'd be happy to rewrite the regulation, including testing as well as staggering.
What's the rest of the board?
All I say is that I think if someone tested it well and there's some part of it that doesn't meet the standards, they should have the choice to put a filter system in that would bring it up to what it's supposed to be, what you guys say the regulation should be. If they want to do that, they should be able to keep their well. If they can't bring it up to the standards that we all decide they have to have, then they have to tie into town water.
It'd have to be the state water.
I like the well testing part.
I do too.
Yeah. So what we'll do is we'll continue.
We need to set a specific date on where we're going to continue it, or else we have to go through the printing it out in the
So do you want to go
newspaper.
out 2 months, or 1 month?
I mean,
that's the
essentially,
issue.
all we would have you do is rewrite these regulations to the point where you have to have your water tested.
Yes, sir.
And if you fail, then you'll have to hook up. How long will that take?
I can get that for
Or
the
you wanna
next
do it
meeting.
Next month or the month after?
I can get it for the next month. I know
Well, but you want to
some
get it out a
scheduling.
good week before, so it's not.
Yes.
You know.
Yeah, well, and also, we should
I'll
also
prioritize this.
also let this, even though there's questions about
Yes,
some of
this
this should all be public.
This is available on the health department's website. There is a large button that says regulations on it. Underneath at the bottom it says proposed regulations. The draft regulations are on there. All the spreadsheets are on there, as well as the memo with my recommendations are on there too.
Fine, so we will continue this public hearing until, what's next month?
Oh, Helene,
You can't be here?
so what would be a good date?
No, it would be, we could do it the third Thursday of March. 16th.
Yeah.
When will you be back?
So you,
We can do it the 5th. We can do it the 23rd, March 23rd, which is the 5th Thursday.
is that good for you, Helene?
Is that good for you? Fine.
All right, so we will have a public hearing scheduled for the March 23rd. We'll just continue this meeting.
So would you like a motion for the record?
Yeah, we need a
So
motion.
I'd like to move that we continue the public hearing for proposed article,
78.
whatever the number is, 78 until March 23.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
We all say aye, so that we'll move that forward.
I would encourage everybody to read the memo on the site. I think it was instructive in a lot of ways, and it's
And-
helpful. So thank you for that.
All the links in the memo are live. So if you want to look at the sources, the references that I put in there, you can link to each reference.
So it'll cost a homeowner $45 every other year.
50
50.
every other year.
Can we get, since we're going to be flooding them with all these water tests, can we get a reduced rate?
I can contact them and at least try.
You would think so.
I hope so.
Just to point out too, with the upgrade of the treatment plant, they are proposing to have the lab be certified. So
Yes.
they would actually be able to take people's water samples or any type of sampling we need done on island instead of shipping it.
That is
out.
correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is correct. They would be able to do it. Once they get it certified, they'd be able to do it here.
Okay,
They're
You have-
just now building.
Yeah.
moving on to the next one.
The next one,
Being the
I'm-
IA
we're
systems.
done?
We're done with the water.
With water?
Yeah. We'll continue this on March, whatever date
March
it was.
23rd.
And we'll have a different proposal. And again, I encourage you all to go on the website and look at this information and look at his memo, because it explains things very nicely. All right. Yes?
Just a quick question. How do you find out about these public hearings? I just read about it in the paper about an hour ago about this hearing.
They're published.
For 3 weeks before every public hearing, there is a legal notice put in each of the I&M publications. We have a bylaw that requires that for the 3 weeks before.
If you, they're very exciting. You know, there's a whole page of these notices that you can all read. All right. All right. The next public hearing will be on edited versions or update of Regulation 51. And we'll do the same process where we'll let Roberto give a little opening, and then we'll open it for public comment. This is similar to the regulation that we have in the harbor watershed area.
It
In fact,
is.
it's the same.
It's nearly identical.
So everyone keeps saying Nantucket, but it is, the watershed district has the same regulation
Yeah.
and Hamid Pond and so forth.
Yes, this one's identical to the Nantucket Harbor watershed regulation, and it is almost the same as the Hammock Pond one. The Hammock Pond one is it's less restrictive. This is same thing. One of the discussions that we were having previous, what was this, a year ago now, about sewers, how sewers have to go into the Hammock Pond, into Nantucket Harbor watershed, as well as the Nantucket watershed districts. We were flirting with passing this regulation back then. We decided to hold this regulation in abeyance pending sewer being brought out to Nantucket. Well, sewer was voted down at the ballot, and there is no intention to put this back on for this Springtown meeting. So the regulation is set forth ahead of you again. In this case, what we're looking to do is require IA systems in the Nantucket Harbor watershed upon technical hydraulic failure, any upgrade or repair, and any new construction or property transfer. The only difference between this regulation and the Nantucket Harbor watershed regulation is that this one has a sunset date of December 31st, 2023. If at any moment sewer gets voted in between now and then, this regulation becomes null and void.
For consistency, shouldn't the other one have a sunset?
The other one
We didn't
should
do
have
that.
a sunset where we didn't. The Nantucket Harbor watershed regulation should have had a sunset date because we are running into situations where the septic system is fine, it's working, there's no problem, technical failures, anything like that, and the person intends to live there for the rest of their life. So they will have a conventional system until that system decides to fail, which could be anywhere between tomorrow and when sewer gets all the way out there or when Nantucket doesn't exist anymore.
Right, Roberto, I understand that, but on the other hand, I think we knew that going in. I remember discussions, and we sort of said this could be a 30-year program, given that kind
Yes.
of turnover. It would take that long, and it ended up where it is in spite of that. So
Yes.
Okay. Comments from the public. Mr. Ray. The public hearing is now officially open.
I think I'd like to address my question to Mr. Atherton as a member of the Board of Selectmen because he's probably closer to the answer here. There is now a
that's a
sunset.
job you're looking for, Richard.
What's that?
A job you're looking for.
Bring it on.
So anyway, carry on.
This the sunset date. If you have a normally functioning septic system in Nantucket, and it's a conventional system, 5 years from the date of this regulation, you're going to have to put in an alternative design system. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. My question now is, or I guess my comment now is, it's now going to be more expensive for the property owner to put in an alternative design septic system than it was to put sewer in as originally proposed in the town meeting article. Am I correct in assuming that?
If you're asking me, that would be my understanding, yes.
That's what and I don't mean to put you on the spot,
No,
Rick,
that's
but
fine.
yes.
I'm happy
but yes.
to answer the question.
Yes. So
It's the same cost that was that people in Nantucket confronted 5 years ago, and as you know, many moved forward to put alternative systems
Yes,
in anyway.
yes, they did. And many did. But there are many out there that have conventional systems that are now going to be put in a position where they're going to have to put alternative design systems and therefore have actually been shot in the foot. Essentially because the sewer is now off the table and it's going to cost them more money now with an alternative design technology than it did to put in a conventional sewer system.
Can I ask you?
Go ahead.
Who said it's off the table? Fiscal year 2018 starts.
Well, that's very true. No,
July
you're
1st.
Steve, you're absolutely correct. And I hope there's a glimmer of light there. I really do.
And I personally don't want to make people go through the whole thing of putting IAs in. In 2018, the April meeting, sewer gets passed.
God love you.
We've got a future study coming up.
And if that could be brought back, then this would save people an awful lot of money out in Nantucket. Thank you.
But you can get a betterment loan at 2% over 20 years.
Only too well do I know that.
Okay? You do that. So there is some financial easement for people if necessary. Please.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Cormac Collier, Nantucket Land Council. I just wanted to be on the record in terms of supporting this request. I do think that the more viable and important option of sewering and an enhanced look at the dump in conjunction with looking at the dump is ultimately where the town should go. However, since we didn't get sewer, this is option number 2, and I support the Board of Health adopting this. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm back for the for the discussion of septic systems. So I have a few questions. You can either answer them while I'm asking them, or you can answer them afterwards. So how does this regulation interact with the administrative consent order process, which has been in place?
Yes, the administrative consent orders have actually expired as of January 1st, and we are in the process with the Chief Financial Officer's office to liquidate those and get that money back to the property owners. For those who don't know, for those who don't know about the administrative consent order, it was a way to escrow money in order to connect to sewer. But there is a caveat in that administrative consent order that is a legal binding document signed by both the town and the property owner, that if sewer is not brought out, or significant progress for sewer is not brought out by January 1st, 2017, the money will be returned to you for the purposes of the installation of an IA system. And it is a legal signed binding document for those of you who are watching at home who have signed an ACO.
Okay. Second is, if we have an IA system in place already, why do we need to inspect the system every 5 years? Doesn't the O&M contract that I have for my IA system require water testing twice per year?
Yes, that is actually the section under the Certificate of Compliance. You would maintain that through your O&M, and that you would be exempt from a conventional inspection. Okay.
Then the 3 new conventional septic systems I installed in 2011, would I be required to replace those with IA systems even if they're working fine in 2022?
Yes.
By this.
Yeah, well,
As proposed.
that's not, I mean, I put in these systems in 2011 with the assumption that they'd have a, 30-year life.
Right.
Why should I be required to change that? Because you guys have changed your mind. Why are homes operating with operating in past septic systems required to install an IA system upon construction, expansion, transfer of property if they're working fine under Title V regulations?
It is working fine under Title V, which is a state law, but the town of Nantucket is allowed to pass a more strict regulation than a state law.
So even if I have an operating septic system that is operating, and I want to sell the property, and it's a conventional system, I or the person who is purchasing will have to put in an IA system.
Correct.
Correct.
Okay. When 2022 comes around, will the island be able to build enough IA systems in the short amount of time required, either 6 months or 12 months?
No.
I can ask Steve. I can ask. I don't know if Mark Willett is still here. But there's absolutely no way. I mean, I'm wondering whether Steve could answer whether we can even inspect every system every 5 years.
It's pretty challenging.
Yeah,
Thank
but if there's a market, Steve, we might get new inspectors. I mean,
Yeah, but still, there's a well. It's not only inspectors that work with Steve, because my understanding is you need a member of the Board of Health present.
To answer that logistical question, we have been putting in so that whenever one of our licensed inspectors lets us know that you are on their list for inspection, we mark you in compliance because we know it's getting inspected within a reasonable amount of time. And as far as compliance goes for the installation of a septic system, your permit for installing a septic system is for 2 years. When you pull the permit from us, we're marking you as in compliance. You have 2 years from the time that you pull your permit to install the system. This sunset date for us that we're putting in here is so that we can have that compliance level. It says installed by. We can easily call compliance as having the permit for the install.
Okay, but correct me if I'm wrong, Stephen, but when you have gone out to do inspections, don't you require a member of the Board of Health staff
Yes,
to be there on site?
They've been very accommodating. That hasn't been an issue.
We have 3 licensed septic inspector on staff.
Okay, and then what happens if after I get this IA system installed, even though I have a conventional system and the IA system needs to be installed, even though it's only 10 years old. And then after 2022, we decide that there's going to be sewers out there. So now I've installed yet a second system, and then I have to install, I have to put that money aside and say, it was I was throwing good money after bad.
We do have an island-wide variance that we passed this year that says if you have put in an IA system and you're sewered, you have 10 years before you have to hook up the sewer.
But what about a new conventional system as well?
No.
I mean, I have 3 homes that I put new conventional systems in 2011. 30 years life on them.
If you're sewered, you're going to have to hook up the sewer.
Or, no, I'm going to have to change them to IA systems.
If this property transfers,
Yes.
or if it fails, you have to put an IA system in.
No, it said...
Fail, upgrade, repair.
Right.
Yeah.
All the triggers. Yes, you would have to put in
Same
an
trigger as the regulation for the harbor area.
Right.
Yeah,
The
regulation
difference
64.
of this, and we haven't voted on, I haven't heard all the board's opinion about it, is the sunset clause in this one compared to the other regulation.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Hi,
Hi.
Debbie Culbertson, Tennessee Ave. I have a standard conventional system, and I've been waiting because I do have an extra lot. It's going to my children, my stepsons. So I'm sort of watching this because I can't do anything until I know whether I'm putting an IA system or hooking up. But my question is, why are IA systems seeming to be so expensive? We have one in our place in Vermont. It's a peat moss system. It's not electrical. It gets checked every year. Does the state regulate what systems we can use, or is it the town?
Yes.
And will there
State.
be more possibilities in the future going forward?
Yeah, so to end that, it's a very good question. Every septic system, every innovative or alternative septic system technology has to be approved by the Massachusetts State Department of Environmental Protection. Right now, there is a similar peat moss system going through the process to be approved. It has to be approved by the Massachusetts Septic System Testing Center in Falmouth. Right now, they're in year 2 of a 3-year study to make sure it would get approved. If it gets approved by state DEP, then yes, you'd be able to install that system as long as your property allows for it. One of the things that a lot of people don't always necessarily understand about these systems, for example, a nitric system requires a significant amount of land. People have been talking about this nitric system as the silver bullet out in Nantucket, but on a smaller lot, as you see in Nantucket, sometimes these systems don't fit. So you will see that this does work on some properties. It doesn't work on others. But there is a list. As long as it's approved by the state for nitrogen reduction, you can use that.
So where would you have the list, or would an engineer have a list?
The engineer should definitely have the list with them, but we also have the list through Mass DEP. It's also available online through their Title V website. and then they're constantly updating that information. In many ways, yes. For example, there is a system created by a company called Arenco, which, if your system is large enough, for example, when Mr. Levine brought up, if your system already has a 2,000-gallon tank in it and already has the infrastructure for it, you can simply retrofit it. You can drop this system in place. A lot of other times, some of these Septitech systems or something, you can just drop the component in series after the tank that you have, if your system already allows for it. So, sorry.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Charlie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Charlie Stott, Nantucket Residents Association. First, I'm confused about the intended area of coverage. The existing regulation 51.01 subject area describes the area governed by this regulations as the area bounded by the center line of Hither Creek, the center line of Cambridge Street, Nantucket Harbor, Broad Creek, and the Atlantic Ocean. The amendment, however, refers to the Nantucket Watershed Protection District Zones A and B, and if I'm reading the map correctly, that's a much broader area. Secondly, I find it interesting that Nantucket owners are being singled out for the requirement that they install an expensive, innovative, and alternative system, but owners in Somerset, another needs area that was intended in the sewer expansion article last fall, are not facing such a requirement. In my opinion, consideration of the amendment is premature. Not only are seasonal owners unable to learn about the proposal and ask questions, but I understand that there are further deliberations being considered by the town with a goal of reaching a consensus on ways of preserving water quality. The proposed amendment to Resolution 51, requiring the installation of IA systems in Nantucket, should be a part of the global discussion that is being envisioned by the town. Regulation 51 states that in order to preserve, protect, and manage the quality and supply of fresh water, and to protect the health and welfare of the inhabitants of the town of Nantucket, the following regulations are hereby adopted. The amendment to Regulation 51 requires in a subsection of the Nantucket Comprehensive Wastewater Management Plan needs area to install IA systems. Why? Once again, where are the data that shows the septics in a portion of Nantucket are polluting the fresh water? For the record, we know that the members of the Nantucket Residents Association place a high value on the preservation of water quality. Prior to last year's annual town meeting, when the expansion of town sewer to Nantucket was expected to be debated at the annual town meeting, we conducted an online survey of our members about this issue. We received 91 responses, and 66% of the respondents strongly supported the warrant article to expand sewer to Nantucket. Only 26% were opposed. However, we oppose this amendment because we think that this is a draconian solution to a problem for which there are other remedies. I think the town should consider more testing of water to determine whether there has been an improvement since a number of new IEA systems were installed in Nantucket and before the fertilizer regulations were adopted and are now, thanks to Roberto, beginning to be more vigorously enforced. Moreover, the sludge from the Surfside wastewater facility that's transported to the landfill should be tested. Who knows what impact that material has on Long Pond? And we might consider stepping up the pace of the mining and capping of the landfill. And we might consider the impact of dredging in Long Pond and Nantucket Ditch, replacing culverts in Long Pond, and new approaches and technologies. Of course, revisiting the expansion of the sewer system is another option. My understanding is that these IA systems will eliminate 50% of the nitrogen, of the nutrient loading. And it seems to me I recall the debate on the warrant article last spring saying that you could do the 50% reduction, but that's not enough to get you to the total maximum daily load. And I wonder if we require everyone to install these expensive IA systems that only take 50% of the nitrogen out of the effluent, whether that's going to help us to get to the TMDL that we need. So until these and perhaps other issues are addressed, the Board of Health, in my opinion, in our organization's opinion, should not place such an onerous and expensive burden on Nantucket property owners by adopting the amendment to Regulation 51. Thank you.
Thank you. Please.
Victoria Gervin, I live in Nantucket. The town has set aside $40,000 for testing of Long Pond starting in fiscal year 18. So will that information be used in deciding how the town goes ahead? Because that could certainly influence what's influencing our water quality.
No, absolutely. The money, we're actually expecting the Natural Resources Coordinator to come here in March, at the March meeting, to also give a presentation on that $40,000 that you were explaining, to see where we're going with that. The town does agree that we do have to continue studying and do a secondary peer review of the landfill. Peer review, I don't know if that's the right wording for it, but to continue the study of the landfill. To answer Mr. Stott's questions, yes, we are continuing with the mining, we are looking to do all this. But the other part that's behind all of this is that even in the Comprehensive Wastewater Management Plan, it says 58% of the effluent is from septic systems and 27%, I believe, is from the landfill. Even if that number gets skewed up to 40% from the landfill and 40% from the septic systems, it still takes a comprehensive approach to deal with the nitrogen and nutrient loading. So even if we remove all of the landfill, if we just shut it down tomorrow, rip it all out and send it off island, we still need to address the nutrient loading that's coming out of the septic system effluent. And to the comment about draconian and harsh ruling, this has already been in place in the Nantucket Harbor watershed for over a year. And it's a very effective program so far. And furthermore, to say that we're singling out Nantucket in this case, the only reason that this is only affecting Nantucket and not Somerset is because the reason the Somerset sewer district was included is because that was the integral infrastructure that was needed in order to make the Nantucket sewer work. The reason Somerset was included was because since the sewer pipes were going to go through there anyway, might as well have them hook up.
Other comments?
Joe LaPuma, Nantucket. I have a question. It would seem to me that the solution to the problem would be sewers. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Okay. So what we're doing here is we're going around in a circle, coming up with a bunch of new regulations that are going to be a financial burden on most people in Nantucket. And maybe what we need to do is revisit the idea of sewers and not wait until April 18, but maybe fall 17. Rediscuss this and get the people in Nantucket to understand what the issues really are. What do you want to happen long term? A complete solution or partial solutions? Because what you're telling me is that the IA systems will not take care of the entire problem.
No,
it will only help us move up.
They're better than the conventional, but nothing.
Correct.
Sewer is 100%.
But it seems to me that what we need to do is go back to the sewer idea. My understanding when the folks in Nantucket said they wanted to talk about the sewers was they wanted to relook at all the points of contamination. If we can revisit this and come up with a comprehensive explanation, I think that you would find that most people in Nantucket would vote the sewers in a heartbeat rather than become liable to this potential expense over the next 10 years. It's how I look at it. It's simplistic.
Happen, this study coming up. So, end of August, the study comes out. They come back. They DNA isotope the Sentinel stations, Hither Creek, Nantucket Ditch, Long Pond. The conclusion comes back, not from septic systems.
Yeah.
Then what? You sue a Nantucket, nothing changes. You still have to address the TMDL.
You do. But I think I think all environmental problems occur because you neglect little things over longer periods of time. The dump was put in, and we didn't have the knowledge of how to build a dump to keep it from contaminating the pond. So now we're mining it, which is making it worse. But we're also taking the sludge from the sewer treatment plant and dumping it out there, which means that when it rains, it breaks down and it goes into the pond. So there's another little piece that might be eliminated right now. How about if we figure out a way to ship that off island and send it someplace else rather than putting it in at the dump?
We're going back to...
I'm just being devil's advocate here.
No, I mean, this is a discussion that the town and the community has had for a long time.
Because I'm all for cleaning up the water.
Yes.
All
right.
I'd like to ask the gentleman a question. Sir, before you sit down, I have long felt that you'll see a lot of comments in written documents produced by the town and others that what we're doing at the dump is supposed to be helping. And I have long felt that made little sense to me, and I'm waiting for someone to explain it. So I'm curious as to why you just said what you just said.
About the sludge?
You were talking, I believe, about the landfill and the improvements in the mining not improving the situation. I think that's what I heard you say.
Well, I think that several of the unlined cells, as I understand it, and I'm not an expert.
Well, I'm not either, but
the
I just am intrigued.
20
So
acres.
This is just like a conversation point.
So that means that every time it rains, stuff just goes right through there.
Okay, gotcha.
So
I
the
just wanted to
unlined cells
understand.
are the problem.
Thank you very much. Gotcha.
Nothing's getting lined as it gets mined.
Right. Yeah, that's
All right,
the point.
any other comments, please?
Mal Condon, North Cambridge Street. Years ago when Mass Estuaries came out and started the study, one of the things they said was the solution to pollution is dilution. Why can't we just put a piece of steel at the second bridge and shut it off? The ditch was dug in 1665. Let's stop it, open up the pond like the rest of the ponds. It's real easy. It would probably cost less than a septic system. So try it. If it doesn't work, pull it out.
Opening up the pond is unfortunately not an option anymore. The Army Corps of Engineers has denied that permit from us.
And I bet if we did the steel at the second bridge and only opened it during the winter months when the plume wouldn't grow, it'd probably leach that way better. But shut it and test it. It's got to be simple to do. Seems just...
Can I say one other comment? When Roberto says opening the pond is not an option,
right now.
and that may have been true when someone last applied, but I don't accept that it's not an option. Okay, and I don't think, just speaking frankly, that saying that implies it's true forever.
Yeah, as of right now.
I just want to be clear about that, Roberto, because I don't think that's the case necessarily. So,
okay. Welcome back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Summary comments here. I've heard a lot of people, express concern about water quality. I think we're all here because we share that concern. But they're also expressing different alternatives here, there, and that, and the other thing. What I would like to encourage with what the board has been doing is looking at all of these options in their totality and addressing them. Many times, for example, the hummock pond openings that were increased and did improve water quality, they didn't improve them enough. You have to look at the other options as well, such as fertilizer and the septics that are in that area too. For Nantucket, sure, let's definitely look at opening as an option, but we can't deflect that from why we are here today and dealing with our septic problem, as well as looking at the dump, which I, in the past 2, 3, 4 months, speaking with Roberto and others, have learned quite a bit and encourage you, which I'm sure you're already involved in, to really look at the dump in conjunction with doing something about septic, which is why we are here today. Thank you.
Well, maybe we should see how powerful the Board of Health is and condemn the dump. And that's an interesting concept.
We would need the Massachusetts DEP 310 CMR 6 or 16, one of the two, to create a site assignment. And
amazing, you remember all that stuff. Let's take one more public comment, and then we will discuss this.
My name is Trish Pastusak, and I live in Nantucket. I think the problem with the sewer getting voted down was an island-wide problem because people didn't want to spend the money. So we either need to educate the whole island as to why we need to do this, or just have Nantucket residents vote for the sewers, because I think most of us would like them.
Thank you. All right, so the public comments are closed. Comments from the board.
A question. I heard a comment about the town working on a plan. I'm not aware of any.
There's going to new data is being generated, yes?
Yes. Yes, the Natural Resources Department has requested some funding for this coming fiscal year to continue research on Long Pond and potential nutrients being released from the landfill. He will be here next month to give a presentation on what that would entail. Because, quite frankly, I'm not even sure what the scope is either.
Yeah, and I think no matter what happens there, the time frame is unlikely to have some kind of magical report by the end of August or whatever. You know, you go. We're not always that quick. Just to be
I guess
clear.
that was my question. Is
Well, I mean,
you said August would have information, new information.
Well, you know,
at least preliminary information.
Preliminary.
You might, but the town may decide it has to go through a procurement, then it has to select somebody, and then you have to do a contract, and then you have to decide whether you need 6 new wells, and then you got to test them, and then you got to look at the results. So I don't know how much.
It's not going to be August.
Well, I think it's very unlikely.
Yes.
We can't even get the results of the annual testing back to the town, except 9 months later. I mean, maybe we could get them to be delivered periodically as they're tested and go through the lab, but that's not what's happening right now. So.
Okay. Very quiet board here.
Well, look, I think this is going to be an issue. I mean, I think a lot of this, frankly, it has to do with a lot of different issues, and I think that's all true. Some of it is who pays. Some of it is the question of whether or not, if you don't solve for the landfill problem, you haven't solved the issue by sewering and all that kind of stuff. So one way to think about this, Mr. Chairman, is to have a start on the effective date of the regulation to be 18 months from now. And that sort of puts a time gun to everybody and says, look, and we're telling you folks in Nantucket right now, and we're telling the town and whoever wants to listen that the regulation has an effective date. It's not happening tomorrow, but it's going to happen.
I mean,
you know what I mean? Something like that.
I support the regulation. I'm still a little, the sunset rule kind of bothers me a little bit.
Yeah, I don't know. Same here.
That troubling. I mean, we could, if the sense of the board is that we're going to pass this regulation, then I would suggest that either that's eliminated or we make it a longer period of time.
Why not just have it mirror the other one right now? And
That's
then
what
the
I
board
would-
can come back
I
at
would
some
too.
point. You might put sunsets into both of them,
Yeah.
but it would treat them equally at that
and
time.
I like your idea of finding a start date out in the future. I mean, I agree. I think we do need a comprehensive plan, and whether the nitrogen from the dump is 40% or 60%, it doesn't matter to me because there's too much nitrogen coming in from the septic system. And even the level that we're supposed to get in our water is artificial too. That's too high. I always go back, and if you look at a natural body of water or go out into the sound, the nitrogen is half what it is in our waters, in our ponds, and our harbors. So to me, I'm a great believer that we need to do something, and I wish it was a sewer. I would sewer the whole island. But
I know you're dangerous sometimes.
I know. That's not going to happen.
The only thing I want to ask is the IA 10-year thing in this.
No.
No, that's a separate variance we granted island-wide.
Okay.
Yeah, back in October.
So since is if sewer does come in, you can have your IA system for another 10 years. That we did in October. So, I mean, are we getting consensus? We want to move forward on this, but without the...
I would, on his suggestion that, you know, we come up with a decent start date.
Decent start date, take out the sunset.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. And I think it's a good idea to adopt it that way because, you know, then we've taken the action, we've given the notice, we've got a deadline. Who knows what's going to happen between now and then?
So what?
But it says we're serious, which we've got to be.
So what is the suggested implementation date?
Well, I thought 18 months might be reasonable.
That would be...
I don't know how others feel. Pick a date, though.
18 months.
Yeah, June of 19 would be at, July 1st or June of 19 would be...
That's 2 years.
With fiscal year.
You could do fiscal year.
It would connect us with our fiscal year.
So June of 2019.
June 30th or July 1st.
2019.
And that gives, I like that, because it gives notice that we support this, that's going to happen, and maybe in those 2 years...
We're going to get a lot more information.
We'll have more information, and maybe we'll have sewers. All right, so I would like a motion then to adopt 51, the amended 51, without the sunset clause and with an implementation date of July of 2019.
And we'll adopt it as amended by town council in order to keep the legal term.
Right, as amended. So I need a motion as amended by town council, sunset and start date.
I would make that motion, Mr. Chairman.
I'll second it.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of adopting the motion as proposed?
Aye.
And amended? Aye. Chairman says aye. So it will, 51 is adopted, but not for another 2 years and without the sunset. And the 10-year clause, if it's sewered, is in effect.
Still in effect.
Is still in effect. Mm-hmm. Okay. Do you have a director's report this month?
Not on the agenda,
It's
no.
not on the agenda. So
Oh, it is on the agenda. Well, we had 2 regulations. One is scheduled for March 23rd, which I will get that to you within the next...
That was March 23rd?
Yes, at 4 p.m. in this room.
Mm-hmm.
If the room is not available, we will have to alter the room date, but the room location. Still have not heard back about our interns for the summer. So far, I know for sure we'll have at least one, but I still haven't heard back from the CDC. And then we have really increased our amount of housing inspections. The word has gotten out that we're doing housing and that we're starting to enforce housing. So our housing would be up by what, Kathy and Art, maybe threefold, since easily 3 to 4-fold.
Could I ask about those just to follow up?
Yes, sir.
Are those usually in response to some kind of input to us?
Yes.
I assume?
They're in response to a complaint.
Gotcha. Thank you.
And then we have been inundated with plan reviews for potential food establishments this summer, so we're looking forward to a really good, robust year again.
Excuse me. We talked last year about going back to issues about food trucks.
Yes, sir.
Ahead of time, so we don't...
We can definitely schedule a meeting specifically for food trucks if you would like, or we can put that as an agenda item.
Because we gave a variance,
Yes,
and
to
then other
lobster
people
trap.
wanted variances, and then...
Yep, we gave a 1-year variance to lobster trap. That went from May to May. So far, we haven't heard from them whether they want to reapply for that variance or not, but it is still relatively
During
early.
the next meeting, just put an agenda item for...
Okay.
And have staff sort of give a proposed...
We can probably put up a list of how many mobile food vendors have applied. It's significant.
What our policy should be, and so
Yes, we need something specific.
so we're consistent,
Okay.
so we don't.
Give anyone variances. So they know what the rules are ahead of time.
Well, I was upset about, in retrospect, that variance.
Well, we put specifically for 1 year, so
So,
we could just not offer it again. And as of right now, that is it.
okay. Anything else on the board?
Good.
Then if there are no objections, meeting is adjourned.